So, telling the weather in Spanish is another topic that involves a lot of grammatical breakdown, because not only are there three constructions for different weathers, the word weather itself for English speakers really doesn't make any sense. The word for weather is el tiempo, but that sounds a lot like the word time, and it also does mean time. It means any unspecified length of time. Confused yet? But you wouldn't use the word tiempo when asking what the time is. That type of time is hora. They say que hora es, what hour is it? However, when asking what is the weather, you don't say que tiempo es. That doesn't actually make sense. In Spanish, their concept is that weather makes itself. The atmosphere makes the weather. So instead, to ask what the weather is like, neither would you ask como tiempo es or como es el tiempo. To ask what the weather is, you say que tiempo hace. So the most common is hace, but because this is the verb to make, you make something. Therefore, it has to be followed by a noun, cannot be followed by an adjective. And when you learn the words, this isn't really important, but it's something really important to keep in mind if you are talking about the weather in like a complex sentence with greater context. But for hace, the base ones are hace calor, it's hot, or literally it makes heat. El calor is heat. The word for hot depends on what is hot. If it is something in nature, the adjective is caloroso, and if it is food, it is caliente. The next one, the opposite of that, is hace frío. In Spanish, it's both a noun and an adjective, so frío is also an adjective, but in this construct, it is a noun. And then other nouns to use this construct are the sun and the wind. So it's sunny, or it's making the sun, is hace sol. And it's windy, or it's making wind, which sounds a lot more literal. It's hace viento. However, in common speech, there is one exception to an adjective following hace, and that is if you are describing the weather. Like if you think the weather is absolutely awful, you would say hace terrible tiempo or hace mal tiempo. And it could also follow a number if you're talking about the temperature used. So if it's 14 degrees, you would say hace 14 grados. Or if it's -5, you would say hace 5 grados bajo cero. And you can use it with different tenses. If you want to say tomorrow it will be sunny, mañana hará sol. So for the next constructions, we go to the verb estar. I guess this is sort of like the middling frequency. With hace, it was the most common weathers, or something that's like happening all the time. Like you can always describe the weather as something, and it's always going to be a certain number of degrees outside. But for está, it's sort of things that happen quite frequently, but it's not that pervasive. These ones, because it's estar, it's always followed by either an adjective or a gerund. And the main thing this focuses on are clouds. So a cloud is la nube, una nube, and if it's cloudy, there is an adjective that goes with this. There isn't the phrase hace nubes. They don't say it makes clouds, which, considering they say hace sol and hace viento, you thought maybe they would say hace nubes, but instead the phrase is está nublado. So they literally say what we say in English, it's cloudy. And if it's completely overcast, you can't see any blue sky, they say the sky is covered, so cloud cover. And the phrase for that is está cubierto. And cubierto comes from the verb cubrir, which means to cover. And it's meant to mean it's covered, the sky is covered in clouds. Then the complete opposite of that, there is not a cloud in the sky. Está despejado. This comes from the verb despejar, which means to completely clear. The next common thing with estar are gerunds. There's from the verb llover, to rain, está lloviendo, or you can just say llueve, even though using the present simple may be, especially in English, for things that are constantly true. In Spanish, you can just say llueve even if the rain will stop in 10 minutes. The same is true for snow. The verb to snow, nevar, then turns into está nevando for it's snowing, or nieva. And two things that these verbs are is what are called radical changing verbs, which is why they sound pretty different between the infinitive and the conjugated present tense. And that is because the O in llover, in 4 of the conjugations in the present tense, becomes UE. So it's llueve, which is really difficult to say, especially if you're English. It's not llove, it's llueve. And then nevar, usually when there's an E in the stem, that in the present tense for the 4 conjugations, but with it being about snow, it's just one. It becomes IE, so an I is put before the E, which is why it's snowing is nieva. And the other common thing with estar is temperatures where there isn't a noun. There are 2 main ones I could think of. Está fresco, which means it's a little crisp and chilly, it literally means fresh. Or está templado, which means it is temperate, or more commonly you'd say it's mild. And so the last grammatical construction for weather phrases, it's very similar to hace, but when you use I, which means there is, it's generally for really specific big weather events like a hurricane or a heat wave or a thunderstorm. I've come up with about 7. They are hay tormenta, there's a storm. Hay trueno, there's thunder. Hay relámpago, it's lightning. With the accent on the first A, that's where you put the stress. So it's not relámpago, it's relámpago. And then hay huracán, there's a hurricane. Hay niebla, there's fog. And hay ola de calor, there's a heat wave. As usual, you can put these in different tenses. To say there will be a heat wave in July, you would say habrá un ola de calor en julio. Or to say we experienced an awful storm last night, you would say hubo una tormenta horrible la noche pasada.